Good evening. My name is Kacper Paradowski and you are watching Poland Daily News. The Polish government introduced new restrictions regarding the coronavirus pandemic. Due to the high number of infections, cemeteries will be closed starting tomorrow. This regulation was implemented due to the November 1st holiday, when Poles celebrate All Saints' Day and visit the graves of their relatives. Prime Minister Mateusz Morawiecki also announced that the entire public administration, wherever possible, is to switch to working remotely. The Polish Prime Minister explained the decision of his government with the fact that tradition is less important than human lives. The past few days have constantly seen new record numbers of coronavirus infection. We waited with this decision because we lived with the hope that the number of infected per day would decrease at least a bit. However, it only keeps rising. We don't want to raise the danger by allowing large groups of people to gather near cemeteries. It was also announced that all of the state administration will be switching to remote work. New conditions of quarantine for the relatives of the infected were presented as well. We ask that residents living with people who tested positive for the virus begin quarantine immediately, not after a phone call to the sanitary inspectorate. We assume that the quarantine begins automatically. Please, if you live with someone who catches the coronavirus, stay at home, stay under quarantine. Remote working is advised wherever possible. We are ordering the state administration as well as appealing to entrepreneurs, if it is not necessary for your employees to be present at your business, please send them home to work remotely. Just to add on the quick diagnostic tests, we are currently carrying out many tests on people with symptoms and it does make a difference. This decision to focus most of our efforts on people with symptoms brings results, since we are able to isolate them. Unofficially, it is said that new regulations could be implemented in the middle of November. So far, students in the youngest classes of primary schools, as well as children in kindergartens and preschools, will keep studying as usual. The Ministry of Health has reported the latest data on the epidemiological situation in Poland. In the last 24 hours, yet another record number of COVID-19 infections was recorded. During the last 24 hours, 21,629 new cases of coronavirus infections were reported in the country and 202 new deaths. Since the beginning of the outbreak of the pandemic, more than 340,000 cases of infection have been reported and more than 5,300 deaths. President Andrzej Duda submitted to the Sejm a draft amendment to the law on abortion. The draft provides for the introduction of a new premise that restores the possibility of abortion in a manner consistent with the principles of the Polish constitution only in the case of so-called lethal birth defects. The president hopes that this step would contribute to ending the protests against the ruling of the Constitutional Court. Taking into account the indications of the Constitutional Tribunal, this project provides for the introduction of a new premise that restores the possibility of abortion in a manner consistent with the principles of the Constitution of the Republic of Poland, only in the case of so-called lethal defects, when prenatal tests or other medical premises indicate a high probability that the child would be born dead or burdened with an incurable disease or defect, leading inevitably and directly to the child's death, regardless of the therapeutic measures applied. In just 4 days, the new president of the United States is to be announced. The end of the electoral race is just around the corner. However, the presidential candidates are not slowing down. Yesterday, Donald Trump and Joe Biden met with voters in Florida. The votes from this state may play a key role in the final outcome of the election. Both Donald Trump and Joe Biden chose the city of Tampa as the venue for their rallies. The leitmotif of their speeches was the state of the American economy and the fight against the COVID-19 pandemic. Donald Trump was the first to appear in Florida. The American president began his speech by appeasing the citizens who feared the coronavirus pandemic. Then he quickly moved on to criticize his rival on behalf of the Democrats, accusing him of being awkward. Trump devoted a large part of his speech to the topic of the economy, noting that between July and September, US GDP growth was 33.1% per year. The experts, however, are cooling down the American president's optimism, reminding him that this growth came after the dramatic fall in the spring, when the coronavirus pandemic broke out, which deprived several million Americans of work. Only a few hours later, Joe Biden also appeared in Tampa. The former US vice president met with his supporters in a drive-in formula. Biden blames Trump for the decline in the rate of the economic recovery in recent weeks and leaving the poorest US citizens affected by the crisis without any state support. Trump was also held responsible for disregarding the coronavirus pandemic and for failing to observe sanitary rules during his election rallies. Biden stated that the US president is not only contributing to the spread of the pandemic, but is also creating divisions and discord among ordinary Americans. The Democrat candidate for president also criticized Trump for trying to dismantle Obamacare's healthcare system. The polls a few days before the election, on a national basis, give Joe Biden a victory, but in the key state of Florida, with as many as 29 votes in the Electoral College, both candidates are supported by a very similar number of votes. The outcome of an election in this state may determine the election of a new president. We will find out on Tuesday if this will be the case and who was better placed in delivering their message to the people of Florida. That's all for tonight. Thank you for watching. Stay with us for Poland Daily Business. Good night.